James Gunn's DCU has a big problem and we need to talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to our movie news. Now I am supporting and I'm open-minded to James Gunn's rebooted DCU. However, that doesn't mean I won't analyse and critique decisions made and stories created. And whilst we don't have any new stories created for the DCU as of this video, there have been some decisions made that I don't agree with, and today we're going to talk about the biggest one. Now this video all stemmed from a tweet from Daniel RPK where he said, "No DCEU movie is canon to the DCU except The Suicide Squad. Some parts from the first Suicide Squad movie that connect to the Suicide Squad are also canon, but the rest isn't. Peacemaker show is mostly canon except for the Justice League cameo at the end." Which got me thinking about that decision, and so decided to put out this tweet, which I will read for you now. If Zack Snyder was in charge of DC and had only kept his characters and rebooted everything else, sure, my favourites would be staying, but that wouldn't be fair to the fans who loved the other DC characters and stories. A full reboot is the only fair option for every DC fan. I went on to say, that way you remove all bias from the picture, starting from scratch with no favourites staying. It creates a neutral state for the fandom. What Gunn seems to be doing is keeping his work and rebooting everything else. That's not fair for the entire DC fandom. Now I want to elaborate on these tweets, as the more I thought about it, the more my opinion on this evolved and expanded, and unfortunately with Twitter, there is only so much you can say in one tweet. So this all came from the mindset that James Gunn is keeping the Suicide Squad characters, plus only a few other smaller characters that have already been introduced in the DCEU, and everything else is being rebooted. That's what seems to be happening at DC, and if this is what is happening, then I think there is a huge problem with this. Now I want to make it clear, this doesn't mean I'm boycotting his DCU or turning against it. I'm open-minded to what he has to offer and will judge the DCU based off of the movies and shows I see. I'm just making an observation based on my time within the divided DC fandom and how their choice of a partial reboot can massively impact their success. To me, Gunn's and Safran's decision to keep the characters that they introduced and to reboot everything else is a very poor decision. I think James Gunn and Peter Safran had a golden opportunity to unite the majority of the fandom when they were put in charge. They had two options that were both equally valid and both could have fixed the DC universe, and it seems they chose the third option. Option 1 would have been they keep the entire DCEU and just build a long-term story around those versions of the characters, which would have merged all sides of the fandom together, as there would have been one universe and all those characters would have been given their time to shine. Or they could have gone with option 2, which would have them reboot everything, start from scratch and work their way up with a long-term plan, with new actors in every role, and it could have been a great way of creating a neutral mindset for every DC fan. There would have been no more sides, just one brand new DC universe, with no connections to the old one, a fresh start and a mostly united fandom. But they seem to have chosen option 3, which was keeping half of the DCEU characters and actors, specifically the ones Gunn and Safran made, and rebooting everything else. This is the worst option in my eyes because it still divides the fandom. Not only does it look like a very biased option from the new DC co-heads, but it also is the worst creative choice in my eyes. Every time Gunn's Suicide Squad characters are on screen, they will be connected to the DCEU. Maybe not story-wise, but they will to the fans. And when we see those characters interact with the rebooted and recasted characters, fans will also think of the old DCEU versions. It means the DCU, no matter what they claim, no matter what story they tell, they will always be connected to the DCEU and everything that happened in that universe, which means the reputation of the DCEU will be a part of the DCU's reputation. They have no clean slate, they have no new beginning. It's also really unfair to the fans who loved the rest of the DCEU that is being rebooted, which is why I mentioned Zack Snyder in my tweet. If Zack Snyder was in charge of DC and had only kept his characters and rebooted everything else, Sure, my favourites would be staying, but that wouldn't be fair to the fans who love the other DC characters and stories. A full reboot is the only fair option for every DC fan, and I really stand by that. I love Snyder's DC films, but if he was put in charge and only kept his movies and rebooted everything else, I would feel the same way. I don't care who is in charge. If you keep your favourites and get rid of everything else, then you alienate a part of your fan base and create a confusing timeline, which is damaging for the brand and just not fair on those fans. A full reboot or keeping everything in the DCEU are the only fair options for every DC fan. That way, you either remove all bias from the picture by starting from scratch with no favourites staying, or you keep everything that has been made so far and push it all towards a singular long-term plan. Either way, it creates a neutral state for the fandom. What Gunn seems to be doing is keeping his work and rebooting everything else, which isn't fair for the entire DC fandom. For me, a partial reboot where Gunn only keeps his work is an extremely poor decision. Doing this will give fans a very valid reason as to why they can be upset with whatever he chooses to create. Sure, it could be amazing, but that's not the point. By keeping his favourites, he is giving fans a very valid excuse as to why they can hold a grudge. I'm open to seeing what he does, but I can't help feeling that his own bias has gotten in the way of what fans truly want or truly deserve. I think the DC co-heads have shot themselves in the feet, and I do think they will keep a negative energy around the DC universe by making this decision. I think they had a golden opportunity to unite every DC fan by starting from scratch or keeping everything they already had. Whether or not this will impact them in the future, we won't know until we see their new DCU. And hopefully it won't impact the success or quality of the DCU, as I think I and every fan feels the same way in wanting good DC movies. So hopefully that is what we get. One person asked me, what matters more, what feels fair to a select group of fans, or that the movies we get are great movies? Which is a very good question, and my response to that is that will be what Gunn has to do, because if the movies aren't great, it will just add more fuel to the fire. A lot of fans thought what he is rebooting were great parts of the DCEU, if not the best, so he needs to prove that he can offer something just as good, if not better. They've put themselves in a really tough spot because they have to deliver extremely high quality stories, otherwise it will make those complaints fans have even more valid, so we will have to wait and see. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on the DC co-head's decision, and I also want to know your thoughts on their decision too. Do you think they've damaged their DCU already, or do you think they've made the right choice? Let me know in the comments below. But that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. I hope to see you here again soon, so until then, have a great day. Bye!